If it wasn't there, many people would be simply living lives of quiet desperation, feeling that they've been just abandoned after being exposed in the workplace. It's been a strong advocate for people. It's been a strong advocate publicly for making sure the type of things that happened in the 50s and 60s and 70s never happen again. And there were some very powerful interests over the years that said, we don't want this. We don't want to hear this negativity. We don't want to support these people that need help. And OHCOW, through all that, got stronger and stronger, and today is now a permanent part of the community. What they were doing was standing up for people that had no voice. And that, to me, is the powerful story of OHCOW, that it empowered people to speak up and fight against government, fight against big companies that had left them by the wayside.
We first set up a worker-run occupational health and safety clinic in 1989, which ultimately led to clinics as we know them nowadays, workers, trying to get more allies to help them out when it came to medical information and technical information. The Occupational Health and Safety Act, middle of the 80s, WHMIS came along, your right to know. So there's a lot of information that people were getting. They just didn't know how to interpret a lot of that information.
At that time, there was virtually nothing that somebody who had an injury could get an expert opinion. There was no facility for that. So people could go to their specialists or they could go to their family doctors, but as we know, determination of work-relatedness, in other words, deciding if someone's problem is caused by work, is quite complex and time-consuming.
We actually wrote up protocols on how to deal with things because we had time on our hands at the beginning. But after about 6 months, we were totally flooded, and it's never stopped ever since. But I still look back on some of the things we produced in those first 6 months, and they still stand up after all this time. We had protocols for how to deal with workers who were exposed to solvents, and that dealt with not only the medical but also the exposure, how to measure it, and things like that.
For the first time, we had access to support from professionals in occupational health, doctors, industrial hygienists, and then later ergonomists and nurses. And I think that was a major thing that OHCOW brought, and its expertise, its hygienists and its doctors and its nurses and so on.
Prior to the advent of OHCOW, there was really something missing there. We couldn't really challenge the experts because obviously they had the education, we didn't. OHCOW provides us that opportunity, and this kind of takes the mystery out of a lot of our arguments and provides us an opportunity to make our case at the community level and also at the workplace.
And I think those quality assessments provided an impetus for lots of different sectors to get their act together. So you never used to hear about ergonomics at work, but now it's a common thing. We were in an era where there had been major recognition of the occupational diseases in Ontario. There was this void. There was no organization which could really help with determination of what it is that's going on. Is this work related or not? It filled a really important void in our healthcare system as it was, and it does so today.
What the injured workers and the survivors of those who die from an occupational disease, what they really need is someone who will understand what it is like to work in a frontline, usually blue-collar job or a demanding physical job with risks. And they don't often get that from an ordinary healthcare provider because the healthcare providers just don't know about those things.
Not every doctor is willing to take a couple of hours out of his day to assess this patient, to look at him. In particular, in OHC disease, it's not the family doctor anymore that's looking after this person, it's a specialist. Their main focus is to treat that person, and rightfully so. OHCOW was huge, not only because they afforded the time to these clients, but also had doctors that studied in occupational medicine, occupational illness and stuff like that.
One of the most powerful things at OHCOW is we actually have the time to spend with patients, and as doctors we don't usually have that luxury. I still work in Emerge, so I still see that patient not only as a patient but see them as a worker, and clearly that's something that's been ingrained in me from the work that I've done here. And it's been really powerful over the years to sort of integrate that to other aspects of practice to understand what caused someone's condition. And of course, the bigger implication is that we transfer those causal type of issues to preventative type of roles that we play. So ideally, I'm not just impacting that person I'm speaking to, it's ideally going to have some sort of implication for a lot of other people. So if I identify that this person's cancer is related to this exposure, that simply perpetuates science, and hopefully we can recognize that in other people as well, and in fact prevent it in other people.
At a point in time now where WSIB is pulling away from providing field services in terms of ergonomists and worksite analysts, and what's happening is the kind of intelligence and field data of what people do in their jobs through some assessment by visiting workplaces is missing.
OHCOW provides a free service that is not available anywhere else that will provide the interdisciplinary approach to the health issues of our workers. As an advocate, I rely on the clinics specifically for that interdisciplinary approach where you can get the ergonomic, the occupational hygiene, physicians all working together to identify and help assist in advocating for the work-relatedness to our problems that our workers face in Ontario.
We will see the typical canary here, the person that is the absolute worst. That is, they develop disease before anyone else. Well, that one person is usually just the tip of the iceberg of other people in the same workplace that might similarly have problems. So unfortunately, we see someone that has pretty profound clinical implications often with asthma, but fortunately, we can then extrapolate their experience and help other people in the same workplace so that they don't develop quite as advanced or severe disease.
I've always had the opportunity to, because of the OHCOW clinics, to be in position. I've been able to tell them, hey, go to the OHCOW clinic. They have a professional staff, very specialized, whether it be in hygiene, whether it be in environmental chemicals and ergonomics, just everything, and even consulting doctors, which are very important, so they can get to the point and find out not only what they're exposed to, but what their coworkers may be exposed to.
There's no excuse for going to work and getting poisoned. The objective, I think, of OHCOW is about the protection of workers and helping workers. So it's a labor-based organization and it's labor-friendly. So this is the place to come.
That's the impact. I mean, there's not many avenues for workers to seek help and assistance as they go through that process. And OHCOW is one of the only organizations that are available for workers, and that's important.
Health and safety professionals don't always come with all of the expertise that they require. So through the ergonomist particularly, and also with the industrial hygienist, it's helped educate me as a professional on such issues. And in turn, I can educate some of our workforce, and that helps everyone in prevention at the end of the day.
I can remember when OHCOW went into the Air Canada in the baggage area and revamped that whole baggage area so workers didn't have to lift heavy suitcases and luggage if they were unloading and loading. That was one of the best initiatives I ever seen done in a workplace, and certainly done by professionals that knew what they were doing.
Health and safety in the workplace is a continuous improvement thing. So there's always going to be new methods, new approaches to improving safety in the workplace. You're never going to be 100% safe. I think it's a great benefit to small and large businesses, particularly small businesses, because of the cost structure.
The first rule of business is health and safety is know when to call someone when you need expertise, and OHCOW is someone who I'd call. The professionalism, the work ethic, and the research that they've done is just, it's absolutely great.
In 1993, we started going in, our nurses and doctors, into Sarnia, arguably one of the largest examples of occupational disease epidemic in the country. where we registered over 1,000 workers with asbestos-related disease, and another 1,200 with markers on their lungs caused by asbestos, which is a high-risk population for developing these cancers and respiratory diseases later in their lives. And before the clinic came, that whole story was untold.
Latency period for asbestos is, anywhere from 25 to 40 years. So I don't even know if we've even reached the peak yet. And I know a lot of my coworkers were exposed to asbestos years ago. There's still asbestos in my workplace. It's an issue, and it's going to continue to be an issue down the road for many years.
Unfortunately, that still continues. That those exposures are still in this community and still developing, and still there'll be many people that will need OHCOW in the future. It has personally shown me that the power of a group of women in particular that came together and said, we will not accept what has happened. We are not going to let others suffer like we have suffered in our families.
World's largest ethanol plant was coming to our community, and another additive to what's already there. And there was a group of us that decided to say, no, enough's enough, leave us alone, go somewhere else. And we're thinking of all kinds of ways on how to stop this. Somebody from OHCOW had come and put a little flyer on one of the mailboxes, and we helped each other out. Like, if it wasn't for OHCOW, we wouldn't know what chemicals are out there and what the harm can do to you.
I think it's very important that we be able to identify the populations at risk, and when you're talking about occupational health, that tends to be the workers themselves. And I think those populations who are at risk need to be able to do something beyond just finding out what the hazards are. They need to be able to do something to be able to change the conditions that put them at risk. And so I think OHCOW has been able to do that through the years, and I hope will continue to do that. But I think that that's a very important part of OHCOW's history.
I'm very proud of OHCOW's work with the migrant farm workers. That was specially funded by WSIB and now more recently by MOL. But I have to say it's a drop in the bucket. But even with what we've had and been able to have, we've helped probably now several hundred farm workers suffering from disease and injury understand that in Canada there are people who care about their well-being and are reaching out and providing an expert level of service.
From when clinics were formed to now, the idea of what is a workplace has changed drastically. We've gone from those big industrial workplaces now to smaller workplaces. A lot of them aren't unionized anymore. A lot of them are in different sectors. So the issues that face workers have changed.
What's so impressive about OHCOW is that it has tracked the evolution of our workplace and of our working conditions and of occupational health hazards in the province. And right now, OHCOW is a very leading light in looking at psychosocial factors. That's where the blue-collar worker and the service worker have all the same issues. The stress of doing more with less, the pressures to produce. OHCOW is dedicated to understanding and penetrating and studying and analyzing the real nature of work in this province and what really happens to people.
OHCOW is the one place that can provide the research and the information required to deal with not just the existing diseases, because as we know, the diseases we're going to see tomorrow are the result of the exposures that we're dealing with today, and with new technology and the materials that are being used. I think more than ever, we're going to need an organization such as OHCOW to turn to.
Priorities have shifted to trying to protect jobs and make sure that people have jobs. And when people are afraid of losing their jobs, health and safety falls down the ladder of significant priorities. And having an organization like OHCOW, where there's always going to be a voice about how important health and safety is and how we can improve health and safety, it's important to have a place for workers to go and deal with health and safety issues.
You do need those agents for change, and I think OHCOW can be that.
There's no shortage of workplace accidents. There's no shortage of workplace exposures. So the need continues to be there. And having that resource, again, it's incredibly relevant today. And I would suggest that, moving forward, I don't see that changing.
The foundation premise for OHCOW's existence isn't stale. To bring the kind of evidence-based medical information forward, it's as vital today as it was 25 years ago.